Martin, who owns this house, and in front of us is his collection of ephemera. This lot should earn you the right to be called a womble. Am I right? Do you collect everything that other folk leave behind?
I think that's fair enough. I mean, ephemera is all about collecting the stuff that was never meant to be kept permanently. It's the ephemera, the trivia of life, if you like.
Where does this interest stem from?
Well, it's quite long term. When I was a student, we came up with the idea. I was interested in printing history and graphic design. That's my business. I'm a lecturer at the Reading University in typography. So as students, we got terribly fascinated by this concept of keeping everything that went through our lives. So my wife and I, we started a scrapbook in 1975, in fact, and it was just for 1 year. So it's all the bits and pieces that went through our household for that year. And it's rather curious to look back and see how labelling has changed and familiar packages have changed their designs. We seem to have eaten an awful lot of tinned tomatoes, and there's a lot of cat food and dog food labels, but we didn't have a pet at that time, so I'm a bit curious about that.
Looking at other things in your collection, you've got some great paper bags here, and an old Smith's Crisp bag. Well,
that's rather lovely.
Where does that date from, do you think?
Well, I think it must be a sort of the heyday of picnicking, because on the label it says, "No picnic basket is complete without them. Always take them with you when motoring, cycling, walking and fishing, etc."
And this looks like a local bag here, Reading biscuits.
Well, Reading, one of the famous industries in Reading was in fact Hunt and Palmer's biscuits, of great international fame. So this is really quite an early Hunt and Palmer's paper bag.
What are these ones with faces on?
Well, in the same way that sort of labels were an interesting and very cheap way of starting a collection, at the same time it rather occurred to me that paper bags would probably disappear with the growth of plastics and such like. So I started to collect paper bags, and that's a wealth of possibilities there. It gets bigger and bigger. But these are rather curious. These are wartime paper bags, and I guess this is the more sort of serious social history side of such collecting, because these actually have a political message.
The industry needs more women.
Absolutely, and miners more coal. And these are rather good pieces of pictorial photography. I mean, they're rather good.
You've got brown paper bags over there, but they're mounted on cream card. Why mounted?
Well, that's because they were salesmen's samples. So these would have been travelling around the country to try and sell the printers and the paper bag manufacturers samples of their work. And I guess these must be 40s, I suppose, looking at the designs.
What are these prints down here? We've got various landscape scenes.
Well, I mean, there is a serious side to printing ephemera, but in fact, these are the more fun things. These are things I found in sort of piles of litter in junk shops, and then suddenly something caught my eye. Because here we have what appears to be a perfectly ordinary print of London, the city of London, but if we hold it up to the light, something rather dramatic happens, and the scene is transformed into one of mayhem and disaster.
Oh, isn't that fantastic? Brilliant.
The Great Fire of London.
And what's that one, that street scene?
Well, this is equally is another transforming print. This is, in fact, an engraving of St. Petersburg in probably the late 18th century. And here we have a row of terraced houses. But if we hold it up to the light, magically all the lights in the house come on. And what's curious is that somebody has laboriously cut out all the little windows of the houses and pasted little snippets of fabric, coloured fabric behind to make those lights happen.
You say there's a serious side to all of this. How has printing altered over the years?
Well, I mean, in printed ephemera, we can really see what happens to the printing processes. Most people think of printing as about books and important things that get kept on bookshelves. But if you think about it, the majority of printing by the local jobbing printer was printed ephemera. It wasn't books. So we like to trace the way printing processes are developed, and we've got a great example of printing processes here. Sometimes we can look at things which are what's called letterpress, printed from metal type. We have examples of chromolithography here, which is a planographic process with a rather grand title. This was an intaglio print. This is probably a copper engraving. So all the processes are reflected in printed ephemera.
Looking at the table over here, you've got ephemera from the Festival of Britain.
Indeed. I'm very fascinated by the Festival of Britain because as a designer, this is an icon of design. And I might say that my hot tip for ephemera collecting would be that to collect material from the Millennium Dome, perhaps. But I would suggest that people don't get the formal things that are the things that most people will keep, but they look out for the trivia, the sort of tickets, the things that normally get thrown away.
I shall have to remember that. Thank you very much indeed.